彼の残した言葉の中にもあるんですが、いい写真を撮るための最初の条件、これはカメラを持っていることだと。彼が一番思考していたのは、多くの人にいかに写真を撮ってもらうか。
1960年代に前谷さんというオリンパスの技術者がいましてね。
カメラが当時はまだ高級品なので、前谷さんをはじめとする開発の方々が多くの人に使ってもらうにはどうしたらいいかって考えた中で、カメラ自体をもっと安く作りたい。
当時6000円で作れないかっていうふうにできたカメラです。
そして当時高かったフィルム代、現像代を少しでも負担を減らしたい。そうしたらハーフサイズのカメラを作ろう。そうすると倍撮れるのですごく経済的です。
で 35mm カメラの24枚だと48枚撮れます。それが非常に画期的だということで、使われた。ペンが出た時にオリンパスを持って家族写真を撮ったりなんかする人が非常にいましたですね。
主にプロを中心として使う機材が変わってきていた。なるべくいいものを作ろうと各社していて、どうしても大きくなってしまっている。その中で前谷はやっぱりプロが本当に求めるものってそういうことなのかっていうことに疑問を感じて、その中で生まれたのが OM1 だと考えています。
結局彼がこれ集大成なんですね。やっぱりかなり命が吹き込まれたカメラではないかなっていうふうに僕は思います。
When I got into the newspaper business, it was just coming off the time when 2.25 was kind of the equipment preferred. The guy that hired me came from the Speed graphic day, the 4x5. As technology progressed, all of a sudden it was accepted that 35mm was great for newspaper work. It's not as physically imposing as a larger camera. The more I become invisible, the more I can become part of the scene, the more the photographic opportunities present themselves to me. The camera, it becomes a productive tool. It's there for a purpose. Maitani realized that, and that drove the original design of the OM. When you put it in your hand, everything was where you wanted it to be. The aperture's right here. My two front fingers take care of that. Other fingers fall back to the shutter speed. It's an enabler, it's a conduit, not an interference between you and what's happening.
1996年にオリンパスは最初の民生品のデジタルカメラを出したわけですけれども、フィルムであろうとデジタルであろうとないものを作るというのは全社共通で今でも一番ベーシックなところに流れているのではないかなと考えます。
デザインを検討するときにスケッチを書いて最初検討して、その次にですね 3D データを入れてからこのようなラフな削りのモデルを作ります。でこれをベースにボタンの位置が適切であるかとか、あるいはグリップ性能はこれでいいかとかっていうのを検討していくんですけれども、我々が一番に考えていることはやはり使われる方、ユーザーのことです。
There's certainly an emotional connection with your camera. As soon as you pick it up, you know, you have a feeling. It's the design, it's how it looks, and it's how it's going to support you in achieving the image that you want to capture. Size and portability and mobility in photography is a message that we've been talking about for decades. The philosophy of the Olympus cameras is being able to shoot everywhere. We had a photographer go to Antarctica, and obviously you've got crazy low temperatures there. We created technology that enables them to do that. If you were that customer, what would the end solution be that you would want? It's important to always be thinking about what do people need, what are they going to need, what's the future going to be, and to aspire to deliver that.
災害に遭われた方が取り戻したいものの最も大事なものの一つがやっぱ写真なんですね。それって単なる現像された紙ではなくて、その当時の家族の思い出がやはりそこに残っているってみんなが思うので、思い出を取り戻したいという気持ちがあると思うんです。つまり写真にはそれだけの力があると思っています。
got a photograph of our son. I think he was a year old. It's got the catch light in his eyes. Wonderful moment in getting ready to tap the glass. It's not a great photograph, but it's a great moment. Wow, look at that. I remember that. Oh, look at this. You know, raising your kids, the pains and the struggle and the exhaustion and the joys and all these things that occur. What a wonderful confirmation it is of you as a human. This is who we are and who we were.
今でもそのものを作るにあたってはお客様の声というのをすごく大事にしています。舞谷が残した言葉の一つに、我々はカメラを開発提供しているんではなくて、カメラを通じて人々が幸せになることを提供しているんだという言葉があります。ないから作る、その精神というのを日々実現しようと、これこそが社会に対するオリンパスの役割だと思っています。
And welcome back to another episode of Red Hot Talk, hosted by myself, Jimmy Chang, and Rod Lawton. And today is special, very special. We have a special guest in the house. And you've seen the thumbnail, then you know who this person is. But if you don't, we're going to do an introduction shortly. He is a celebrated, multi-award winning photographer. And everyone, please give a round of applause. It's Jay Dickman in the house. There you go. Here you go. Hi, Jay. How are you?
Good morning, Jimmy and Rod. How are you all? I'm doing very well. How are you all doing this morning?
We're fine. I think apart from the weather, and I'm trying to hide from the rain at the moment.
Yeah, we're coming off of a very cold winter here in Denver, so looking forward to spring.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot of people slowly joining now, and I'm pretty sure this is going to populate in a very short time. So for those who don't know who you are, we're just going to run a very short introduction, because you and I had hosted one of these shows about 2 years ago during COVID time, and so it's really great to see you once again, and also have a chance to share your photographs and also talk about them, and hopefully this particular talk will inspire more photographers to do what they love, which is photography. You have a great mix of different genres of photography showcasing today, so we're going to talk through them in just a moment. So before we do that, let's do a short introduction about Jay. So you are a photographer, Jay, but let's talk a little bit about yourself and how you started photography, and also what did you do, and then what are you doing right now?
Gracious, I hope we have about 3 hours for that answer. I've been in the business for, it's impossible for me to believe, but over 50 years. I started off many years ago as a newspaper photographer. That was my first intro into the business. Before that, in college, I was an English lit major. When I grew up, my parents had 2 books at home that I've always attributed to where I've ended up, and those were called U.S. Camera at War. My dad had been given those as a young man, and they were photographic books. And I remember looking through those books as a kid and just being astounded by the images, by the frozen moments, and everything keeps going back to moment in photography. And I know, much to their chagrin, that inspired me. The things they had in their house inspired me to get into this business, because my parents came from the generation that I should get a job with a company and stay there for 50 years and come out with a gold watch at the other end. But I was inspired by these moments I saw in these books, and I was looking at Life magazine at the time and at National Geographic, and just astounded by these works of art that were printed. And to me, the whole obvious fruition of the business is the print, either the printed page or a print. But I knew I wanted to be a photographer. I didn't know how to do it. But I had read somewhere that, you get a portfolio build. So I had 3 photographs in my book, my portfolio. And I was dumb enough that I didn't know that I shouldn't go to some of the top. I was in Dallas. Some of the
decided to approach some of the top photographers in the city at that point with my 3-picture portfolio. A few of them refused to see me. A couple of them kicked me out within minutes, but a couple were very kind at that point. They said, well, you really need to have a broader portfolio. And they were showing me my work, and I was taking all this in. So I started expanding it. Then my portfolio was larger at that point, my body of work, and I took it into like Associated Press and United Press International and to the Dallas Morning News, and all these people kind of like, nice kid, come back in 5 years. But I went to the Dallas Times-Herald, and this guy that was a photo director, I think, kind of felt sorry for me. And he said, well, you kid, this is good work. You need to have sports. So I thought, well, how do I get to be a sports photographer? You look in the classified ad in the newspaper. Kind of stupid, wasn't I? But about 2 months later, I was looking through the classifieds, and somebody had posted a notice that sports photographer wanted. So I applied for the job, and it was an incredibly difficult vetting situation, really tough on the interview because I was the only person that applied for it. And he was paying me $5 a game to go photograph American football, basketball, other sports. But I was able to build my sports portfolio. So I ended up taking that body of work back to the newspaper, my body of work with sports photography. And that same guy at the Dallas Times-Herald said, well, this is really nice. We don't have an opening right now, but we'll keep you in mind. So I think it was like 2 months after that, he called me and he said, hey, we had just had a photographer quit. It was a woman photographer on the staff. He said, this was Wednesday when he called me, and he said, can you be in on Monday to start your job? I was like, sure. And I got off the phone and I started thinking about it. And it's like, I can't do that. I don't know what I'm doing. And I think it really came down one of those pivotal moments in your life, one of those crossroads where I put my hand on the phone. I was going to call him back and tell him I can't do it. And I know, and my hand was on the phone, and I know if I picked up the phone, I would have dialed the number. If he'd answered, I would have said I couldn't come in there. My life would have gone 180 degrees opposite direction. I did not pick up the phone. I showed up at work on Monday. And one of the very first photographers to whom they introduced me was Bob Jackson, who took the picture of Lee Harvey Oswald being shot by Jack Ruby. And everybody in the audience is going, oh, I remember that picture. Yeah, Bob won a Pulitzer for it. And I realized, first off, that I'm in way over my head. But this job was incredible because I hit the ground running. You had to go shoot 3 to 5 assignments a day. You had to produce. The editors, a photo director didn't want to hear, I'm not feeling creative and I'm not feeling enthusiastic. You had to produce. And it was in all different genres. It was in street photography. It was in fashion. It was in sports. It was in all these different types. Excuse me. So I was learning as I went. And it was the most incredible time of my life because we were kind of at the point I got the job, we were a sleepy afternoon paper. The LA Times Mirror came in about 1.5 years after I started, bought the paper. They brought in top level people. They called me in. We had a staff of about 8 people, photo staff. They called me in. I was the youngest, newest guy. And the new editor of the magazine, the newspaper said, we're going to make this paper a morning paper. We're going to make it a nationally prominent and internationally prominent newspaper. We want you to be our photo guy that goes out on all these stories. And it was, talk about heady. It was all, so we were jumping on major news stories, worldwide. We'd rent a Learjet to go photograph a story. It was outrageous for a 20-something-year-old kid getting to do this. But I was building my body of work, and more importantly, I was building my love for this work, something that I still have. I've always thought, you pick up the camera and the scene in front of you is never the same twice. No. It's always different, at least in this type of work. And I think that's what a friend of mine said, that what she loves about photography is it's always problem solving. And that just puts it in perspective so perfectly. That you pick the camera up and it's a new situation in front. It's your job to get the best photograph out of it possibly. You and I were talking earlier, you were talking about the diversity of my work. I've always considered myself a generalist. And that's what I love about the business, because I've tried to apply the thinking that every situation, no matter
Yep.
what, has
Yep.
its better at the moment possibly get. So it's funny because my work these days is primarily with National Geographic expeditions, which they do trips all over the place. They do land-based, ship-based, aircraft-based workshops, all sorts of things. And they have a geographic photographer on board many of those, because National Geographic is known for its photography, obviously. So, and I'm shooting heavily on these trips. I'm talking about photography. I just came back from a trip about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I'll tell you what, Jimmy and Rod, I still pick that camera up, and it still is magic. It's like, I cannot believe I get paid to do this. I can't believe this is what my responsibility is. And that's what I think most photographers in my type of work love, is that we become the eyes for our viewership. We're kind of I said that in the video, that the camera is a conduit between
Well, it's always been the kind of like the philosophy of National Geographic, right? You know, to bring the visions to viewers' eyes and to readers' eyes. You know, in the magazines in the old days when travel wasn't a thing yet, and people who bought the magazine, who see the photos inside, and they just get inspired and wow, you know, for all those special places, special elements, special objects that they have, you know, seen around the world.
Absolutely. And their mantra is, to paraphrase it, to make viewers care about their world, which is done in a huge part through photography. Obviously, they get incredible writers, and the text narrative in that is incredibly brilliant. But the photography is, I still look at the magazine, I still look at the website, I still look at it in the sense that I'll pick up a copy of the magazine and look at the website, and someone will bring a body of work out that just, you know, the level has been raised again.
Yep. So it's very interesting, Jay, about your past and all those different things you've done before, but all, you know, give you all the credits. You know, you have made it when you have made the photography interesting for you, for yourself, and you continue like that to be like this, and which is really incredible. And so what are you doing now? So after all these like exciting kind of adventures that you've done over the past many years.
So I'm still doing it. Like I said, I just came off of a geographic expedition, aircraft expedition around the world by private jet. You know, hey, somebody's got to do it. I've got several other trips coming up. I've got one in Antarctica, South Georgia, one in Greenland. I've got Wildlife of the World by private jet. And we also do our own photographic workshop, First Light workshops, which we have one coming up in Alaska. We have one coming up in India later this year. We just finished one in Alaska late last year. We were in Namibia earlier last year. So it's always something coming up. And my schedule before COVID, it was insane. I would be gone sometimes 6 or 7 months out of the year on a regular basis. Just before COVID hit, in 2019, in the first month of 2020, I shot in 49 different countries. So it's just going, but it's still amazing. And just what you get to see in front of you in the camera is unbelievable.
I really admire your energy. I mean, I wish I'm as energetic as you.
Well, it does, and I think the energy keeps you going. To me, it's just, I mean, some of those trips are crazy. I did one trip in 2019, came back from a 26-day assignment for Geographic, and then 13 hours later, after I arrived, I'm flying off to India. So this is, I'm only 22 years old, so it's not tough on you or anything.
So
that was a joke.
Yeah. Well, you look 22 to me, Jay.
You know how to say the right thing, Jimmy.
Yeah. Well, okay. And so for those just tuning in now, I can see more people are joining now. And so today's chat is actually more about photography. We're gonna study some of Jay's signature photos through his entire career. Some of them are truly amazing, emotional, dramatic, you name it. I'm actually losing all the descriptive words to describe Jay's photographs. It's amazing. That's one word. So we're going to go through some of them. We can't showcase all of them, obviously, because Jay has a portfolio. You can see from the back of his room is all of his photographs there is more than you can imagine. So we're going to pick a few to talk about, and Jay is going to talk through each photograph, how he captured those, and we're going to ask a couple of questions about, the photograph itself, and I would like all of you to contribute to this chat today. And if you got any questions about any of the photographs, please jot it down somewhere. And when we finish the presentation of the photographs, you're very welcome to start asking questions. And so that way we can start looking all the different questions from all of you, and we start answering one by one rather than jumping in randomly, because it's going to be a little bit difficult to trace in afterward. So we get started and looking at some of your photos, Jay.
That sounds good.
Okay,
I'd rather look at my photos than at me.
No. I quite like looking. Does anybody started from the beginning? Look at that little Olympus movie that made of Jay. He look handsome in there. He looks like James Bond to me in there. holding that OM1 cocking the shutter. It's just almost like James Bond, like holding the gun. That is all absolutely amazing.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
I noticed when I look at that film, it's like, wow, that rewind lever was out. That was one of those unintended little errors of, oh no.
I noticed that. I didn't say anything.
Yeah, we all saw that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Let's have a look at your photographs now, and let's see. So let's go. First photo I'm gonna pick is obviously you. You're younger you.
That is me. That's along with my wife, Rebecca, about several years ago, to say the least, and got rid of the hair. I thought the hair looked so cool, but every now and then you'd blow your cool with the long hair when you'd be shooting with I was shooting with Nikon in those days, in film days, and you'd be using a motor drive, and the camera with the rewind knob would grab your hair and it'd rip your head into the camera, and it just kind of blew the whole cool look about the thing. So, but it's fun to look back, because I've got I'm sure there's a bottle of water in my hand right there. So, but
it's Red Bull. It's Red Bull.
Of course, yeah.
Well, you know what? Yeah, all this long hair styling is definitely a new type of photographer's look, right, Rod? And we see so many youngsters now growing long hair when they're photographing outside. So it's the in look at the moment, Rod. And I think, Jay, you should grow your hair back and to blend into the newer generation.
Well, I remember, and I'll have to attribute the UK market, but when the movie Blow Up came out in 1960, whatever, 67, that was like, that's so cool. I want to be a photographer. And that was just one of the many components that drove me to that. But photographers always had that niche of being kind of a cool business, and it is fun. It's not a business, it's who you are.
Yeah, of course. So, okay, your profile photo is shown now, so everyone knows how you look like when you were younger. Let's have a look at another photograph, which I found extremely exciting. This is amazing. So tell us a little bit about this photograph.
Great choice. Not that I'm biased, mind you. This was, like I said, I used to photograph rock and roll many years ago, but this was at a Willie Nelson picnic, 48 hours at Atoka. These were insane events, drunk people, high people, nuts people, and those were the photographers. Then you got into the crowd. But this was during a rain event during one of these, and these crazy people were, just like Woodstock, were running along, throwing themselves in the air through the mud and all that. And this is one of those situations, excuse me, that I always tell our photographers in workshops, when that camera goes on around your neck, you've got to be ready.
Yes.
You're now a photographer. So what I do when when the camera goes on around my neck or on my shoulder, I set it in what I think is an appropriate setting for the possible event that may be in front of my eyes. So
Yep.
walking through the crowd, and I just turned and saw him, swung the camera around, don't even have it to my eye because like, oh my God, there's a moment, and clicked it. And you know, you in film days, you didn't have that luxury of having the monitor on the back of the camera to confirm or not confirm you had the moment. But when you shot film and you had those 36
Yeah.
exposures and you're always doing a countdown to see this bit of new roll in, you knew when you got the moment. You kind of innately knew that, okay, everything came together on that. That's working. So and when I saw it, it's like, oh my gosh. And I still think that's a powerful photograph. And the picture has always kind of spoken to me what I love about still photography. And that's the intimacy and the personal aspect of it, because we freeze this moment forever to study, to pick up that print or that page and look at it. We don't do that with video or film. I love video, I love film, but they will never have the personal, intimate aspect of a still photograph. We watch movies, we watch film, but we look at photographs.
Absolutely. And I think that one really, I think, magical thing about photography is that, you know, if you look at this particular frame, for instance, you know, you can have a lot of imaginations, you know, from whoever is actually looking at it. And while you mentioned about films and movies, you know, those are directed, so they are directed into directions that whoever set it before. While for a photograph, you may have shot it, you may have your own interpretation when you make this photograph, but for everybody who's looking at it, they can have their own imagination, have their own interpretations about the photograph itself. I think that's the beauty of photography, and you know, it's open, almost like reading a book in a way. You know, you can imagine how, no matter how you describe a character, but it's still up to the reader own imagination to think about, oh, what is that character going to look like? What kind of personality does he or she has in it? And I think that's the beauty of it. I think it's really, really amazing that you know, we have this medium to showcase the world about, you know, things that you capture.
Exactly. You know, and I think the job of the still photographer, when you're successful, is to put the viewer into the frame.
Yeah.
So they feel like, I think when you're successful, the viewer knows what the place looks like, smells like, feels like. They can almost hear the sounds of it.
Yeah.
That's when you've accomplished your job.
Exactly. And I think this is a good example because you mentioned a couple of words there, which is very critical for anyone who is aspiring to be, let's say, a photojournalist or reportage documentary photographer, is anticipation. You know, you have to be ready all the time, right? You know, when you're in a situation, you really need to be ready to shoot anything that suddenly appear around you, and you have to have that reflexes and the ability to capture those moments as well. And obviously, you know, that you can't capture everything. No photographer can capture everything that's happening, but if you do so happen to capture that particular moment in the right location with the right lighting, you're going to make that magic happen. So I'm going to show you another photograph here, which is the next one, and I think it's also very critical. So for those who are looking at this photograph, you know, you kind of have that sense of this person's right in front. So Jay, talk through this photograph.
Yeah, this was at an American football game in Texas. It's TCU College, and this guy had just scored a touchdown, and after he would score a touchdown, he'd kneel to pray for a second. But I love that whole moment of that ball almost levitating off his fingers. The space between if the ball had touched the ground, the picture wouldn't have worked. So this is what I tell people, that, you know, we're responsible for that whole viewfinder, and probably 90%, 80% of what you're going to see in this presentation, their pictures are uncropped. When you're in wildlife or sports, usually, you know, you've got to crop because you can't always get the exact moment when it's happening so quickly. But I think it really makes everybody a better photographer if they try to crop when they shoot. Don't miss the darn moment, get the moment.
Yep,
absolutely. But you use the edge. Yeah, the viewfinder is your canvas. You're responsible for everything that's going on in that image. And so the edges of the frame are incredibly important too. If I'd cut off his head, if I'd cut off the towel flapping up from behind him, all those things are elements that I think help to make this picture a pretty nice picture.
Yeah, absolutely, and I found it incredible, and you nailed it. You know, basically, I was talking about the actual ball hovering in the air. So this is the moment that you capture. And guys, you know, for those who don't know, this is shot with film cameras, right, Jay?
Oh yeah. These are old pictures. These are you're starting off with my old black and white from newspapers. And I
Yep.
love black and white. I love film, and film was one of the best teachers on earth because, like I said earlier, you knew you had 36 exposures, and you'd
Yep.
put that camera in, and when you're in a situation where a moment was building and building, very hectic, very crazy thing you were photographing, you were doing count all the time, 36, 35, 30, 20. I've got 10 frames left. Do I change film because it looks like the moment's about to happen, or do I just really, really slow down and force yourself to engage that much further? So that's, for me personally, that's where film was such an incredible instructor.
Yeah, I think you know, this is something to be learned, you know, from all the photographers who grew up with digital, and then they didn't realize, you know, the limitations that film photographers had in the past. And you know, we have, as you know, especially in Olympus, right, you know, we have pro capture now, you know. For anyone who used the pro capture the feature, you know, these sort of moments will be a lot easier. But having said that, you know, you're going to end up with hundreds if not thousands of photographs, and you're going to pick 1 or 2 frames from it to get these sort of shots. But you actually anticipated the shot and you clicked it at the right time. And this is what we talk about in anticipations in photography a lot. And for many people who just try and rely on luck in a way, and is the wrong approach. You know, you got to be ready as a photographer. You're going to be ready when you're in that situation in an event, whether it's going to be wedding or on the street. If you see something that interests you, you're going to be there at that moment, look for the light. If you catch it, and then that's it. That's when the magic happens. I think this is really, really important.
It is.
Jay,
It is absolutely.
Can I ask a couple of questions, if that's all right? One
Sure.
of the things I wanted to ask you was, you said you love black and white. Could you explain what black and white does in your mind that perhaps color doesn't?
I will answer that. I've got to kind of move Rod backwards on the answer in that. I love color because I love the palette and the length and strength of color in an image that can make the image look beautiful, the visual information that color has. But I love black and white because you do eliminate kind of that interference of color where it comes down to structure and moment and composition. You don't have that palette as one of those components that's going to draw the individual in. So color has, like I said, I shoot everything almost everything in color today, and that's the beauty of the digital file, because you can then, if I'm shooting something and I'm going to convert that to black and white, I still want all that data, so I'm still shooting the raw file, etc. But in film days, the frustration was if I'm shooting black and white, it's got to be black and white film. I could do conversion from color, but it never quite looked good. But black and white was just, it came down to the elements. It came down to what the information was that was in front of you without that kind of interference and bias of color. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. I think it's one of the things about black and white photography that can make it a very powerful medium. You're not fighting an extra distraction, are you?
Exactly, and it's a plus. It's a wonderful thing, but it can be when you get into those. You look at some of the. I mean, I grew up looking at the great Henri Cartier-Bresson and Danny Lyons and all these people from the 50s and 60s that were working with 35 millimeter lenses or 50 millimeter lenses, and making these pictures that are still absolutely iconic and incredibly powerful. And many of them were black and white. But then you look at some of the early, and I mean, I'm talking all over the place because people say, well, which one do you like to shoot in? And my answer is always, it depends. What's the situation dictating? So It does come down to, and the beauty of, the great thing about digital, you can shoot all you want. The bad thing about digital, you can shoot all you want. And I see people tending to overshoot and trying to find something. And we've done a workshop before where we gave somebody, I think it was a 24 exposure film, and it's okay, here, knock yourself out for the day. And this is all you've got for the whole day. But you also think about Jim Brandenburg, who was an incredible geographic photographer, who did a famous book called Chasing the Light, where he shot one picture a day for a year. And the book is incredible. And it does come down to the camera is a tool, you know,
Yes.
and that's what I love about the OMD Olympus cameras, is that they're small enough, they're light enough that they get out of the way, or what's happening in front of me, what's going on up here, the camera's less interference on that. So I mean, I could go off on this for the next hour, but this picture Jimmy just showed is one that I always talk about. We have certain elements we can use when we photograph. We have certain components, and one of them is humor. And I think if you bring, and that's something I hopefully brought into a few pictures, especially in the old newspaper days, because you had to have something to engage an audience. It's been proven that, you know, if you're looking at geographic, or if you're looking at a newspaper, if you're looking at somebody's slideshow, your audience is going to give your picture less than a half second of attention. You've got to do something to grab them by the eyeballs and bring them into your world. So humor was a great tool. I'm photographing this story on rodeo clown school back in Texas. These men and women went to learn to be rodeo clowns, you know, to divert the bull from the rider. This guy was on his first day in class, and he was trying to figure out where the bull is. So it's one of those things that you've got to be so connected to the viewfinder when those little moments themselves, which is, holy cow, I mean, I go off on tangents, but I shoot with my iPhone all the time. I love it. I see it as one extra tool in the camera bag. But what I don't like about that is you're holding the iPhone out here, and you've got, one, the distraction of sometimes bright light, but two, you're trying to watch for the very subtle, sometimes extremely quiet moment of somebody's eyes looking off to that direction. And you're not going to see that when the camera's held out here. That's why I love to have a real camera held to my eye, that is my world. That's all I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's definitely a wise words. But I picked up something you said. You know, like you know, we have lots of different lenses, and people asking you about, you know, which one you should use, and you said, you know, depending on situations. And this is exactly the same excuse I tell my Mrs. White. That's why I have so many lenses, and so I just can't complain because I need this for that, I need this for that.
It is, but when I shoot, I always shoot with two cameras. I always carry two cameras. I carry the short one. It depends on the situation. It depends. That word comes up regularly. But I carry a wide zoom on one and a telephoto zoom on the other. So that I'm not carrying a camera. I'm trying to lessen what I carry so that the photograph, the situation becomes the driving factor. If I carry a camera bag with all these lenses, I'm always thinking, oh, I've got the wrong lens, and changing. And so I find that works for me better. Now, this photograph you showed, photographers are often witness to very private, sensitive, often tragic, sad, whatever moments. This was one of the last casualties that came from the Vietnam War. This is back in the 70s. And it was a funeral for this gentleman and the family in front of the casket. And I run around to the other side and made a very intrusive moment of faces and the tears. But I felt this was a more powerful moment that you have. And again, when I tell people, when you see a photograph that works to you, break it down. Why is that photograph working? What are the elements here? Well, here that's pretty simple. You've got the empty benches on the left that contain the viewers. The funeral's obviously over. You have the family standing for the last moment in front of the casket. That's a gentleman's brother. In the middle, I think the little tail flip of the coat in the wind is important, but the daughter on the left with the American flag under her shoulder, leaning in with her little bitty purse, and then you have the gravesite on the right. So all these elements, you know, a photograph contains a narrative, and this is especially in photojournalism. You've got to create a narrative for your audience. And I think this one just worked on a very simple basis of kind of trying to approach this situation gently and softly to depict the sense of this last moment here.
Absolutely, I totally agree, and all these little elements there, and hopefully we'll have time to show you one of my photos later, and which is basically
Great.
in a very similar theme, and all the little things in the photograph, in the frame itself, mean something. So it's a narrative, like you said, about that particular photograph. But now, as we are onto war, and you had covered the Salvador War, right? At the war of Salvador, and then
Correct.
there are some great photographs there, and for the viewers now, and these may look a little bit disturbing, but obviously this is photojournalism, and we're gonna have to study some of these photographs, which are truly amazing, and it could be very powerful photographs. And so Jay, let's talk a little bit about this particular one, because this is, to me, is one of the most, to me anyway, the powerful photographs I've seen in your portfolio.
Well, thanks. That was from early 1980s when I worked with the newspaper. Like I said, we were, excuse me, we were building a viewership. We were building where we were traveling worldwide, and the newspaper decided to open a Central American bureau, and a writer friend of mine went down to open it up, and they asked me if I wanted to go down there to photograph the war in El Salvador. And I'd photographed at that point some very tense situations, riots, and kind of out of control things. So I was always curious how I'd do in this situation. I went down there, and we kept hearing that there was this place that they referred to as the killing grounds. And rumor had it that it existed somewhere, and all the journalists heard about it. No one could find the place. I went down one of my trips and met up with my writer friend, and we found a taxi driver who said, I know where this place is. And 95% of the time it was like it didn't exist. But we got up early the next morning, went out to this, about 45 minutes to an hour outside of San Salvador, the capital city, to this old lava flow. And we got out of the cab and started walking in. I looked over and I saw this skull laying here. This was a death squad victim. And this is what the killing grounds were supposed to contain. It was where the death squads, who were operating very constantly in the country, were executing. They were right-wing death squads, and they were executing those people they felt were injurious to their process. Yeah. But this was a death squad. I mean, I felt this picture said it so strongly. We ended up finding 53 bodies in varying degrees of decomposition from just shot the night before to this. But to me, this was one of those situations where the stark light of that
Yes.
tropical mid-morning really worked well. And we ended up using this picture on the front of the newspaper on Sunday when we had 500,000 circulation. The entire top half of the front page intentionally. So when that viewer, that subscriber to our newspaper, walked out in their, in this wonderful free country of ours, to pick up their newspaper, and they open it up, they were confronted with this. And this, again, is the job of the photographers, to put our viewers into that environment so there's no mistaking what's going on. I always bring up Eddie Adams, who did the famous photograph of the Viet Cong suspect getting shot in the head, and Nick Hutt, who made the incredible photograph of the little girl running napalm. That those two photographs were attributed with bringing the Vietnam War to an earlier close, because for one of the first times in history, the public was allowed to see war photography of what was really going on. The work from World War II and all those, incredible, but essentially those images had to be cleared before the public could see them. So the picture is a very, very, very simple but very graphic image that states so much.
It is, and I think that and just by looking at this, it does make a lot of people think, and no matter how experienced you are as a photographer, and if you go to a war zone, an active war zone, and then you're trying to document, you're trying to photograph something, and wouldn't you have the feeling of okay, this is going to be dangerous, and should I go close, or should I find something slightly behind the scene in a way, or you're just going to go all out? It's going to be quite conflicting, because as a photographer, for myself, I want to get in there to capture things, but at the same time I will be worried about safety and all sorts. And I know different person can have different feeling about this or different take on it, but I think that it can be quite conflicting, right? You see something happening, you really want to jump in, but it could be extremely dangerous. So did you not have that kind of feeling at the time when you were there?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, when you're covering a war and you're trying to cover all the components, full aspect of what's going on, you end up putting yourself in danger. And like I said, I photographed some very tense situations back in the States that I felt I was fairly ready for this. I also ended up working with a couple of photographers early on that had been there for a while, so I was learning from their graciousness to allow me to be there. And many photographers work in that same way. When you'd go out for the day, many stayed in San Salvador, the capital city. There was one hotel in which many of us stayed. And you'd try to go out with somebody else just for the safety part of it, but you'd pull up to a roadblock,
Yep.
whether military or roadblock, and you'd never be sure the response you were going to get. Would you be dragged out of the car? The
Yep.
American journalist Bill Stewart had been shot and killed driving up to a roadblock, taken out of his car and shot just a couple of months before I went down there. So those were things ringing in the back of your head the entire time. Yeah, and I got myself into a firefight one night I shouldn't have been in. Was nearly executed.
Oh dear.
Not directly at. There's no movie background music playing. There's no, go back to the bar and, talk about the bravado of what you did. It's just the reality of, it's like if somebody walked in right now and shot at you, it was so unsettling and so disturbing. And
Yep.
it was interesting because after I won the Pulitzer for this body of work, the newspaper wanted me to go on to Beirut and I was going to become a war photographer. And I just met Becky, who I'm still married to.
Congratulations.
And it was like, well, that's been for a while now, 36 anyway, but it was like, I also wanted to see what I could explore as a photographer. I mean, there is unbelievably important, incredible work by, oh my God, look at some of the New York Times photographer, the LA Times, the Washington Post, Lindsay Addario, all these people that are doing work that is just mind-bogglingly powerful. And I just decided that I wanted to try other work too. It was just my decision. So I didn't go to Beirut. This picture was shot about, the one you've got on the screen right now, was shot just a couple of minutes after that other picture was shot. And it's one of these things that you're looking, you're kind of laser focused as a photographer. You're looking at the scene around you. What does the scene provide that's going to give you an image that you can share with your viewership?
Yeah.
You shoot photographs in this, you've got to pick one or two because we can only run 2 or 3 photographs that day. But I saw this scene and got down on my hands and knees and crawled for 50 yards over the lava and shot it with a 24, composing it. Oh my God, that buzzard in the background. This is not composite. This is how it is. Horrible light. This is a really tough negative to print. This is film. But I shot about 4 frames and then kind of the horrible, I shouldn't say that, but the cab driver we were with, and like 4 frames after this, he walks in the background and he's shooing the bird away, thinking, I want the buzzard out of the photograph. So, our job is, you often see scenes, and you hope to get, and everybody's missed some, and you miss a great situation, and it's like, there's one I wouldn't even go into. I missed a picture once that I woke up for 3 weeks afterwards in a night sweat. Like, I can't believe I missed that.
I think I really liked it. I think I really like these photographs, and because obviously the one before that, the skull with the bullet hole in the head, in this quite a prominent picture, but this one, I think somehow the magic just happened there. Obviously the skeletons there, contrasting the dark, the surrounding, I think they're just rocks or from the lava or something, and but that really created a big contrast there. And like you said, the buzzard, the bird at the back, that really nailed it.
It's just you're looking through, and it's interesting because sometimes you go into situations where you have a preconceived image, and you've got to be careful of that because sometimes photographs present themselves to you often out of left field that you've got to be ready to adapt immediately. Like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Let's do this. So, and even just shooting this vertically was an obvious one, but it's one of those situations that, and people feel that photojournalists are heartless or cold. I beg to differ. We used to have in the States, in Washington, D.C., a museum called the Newseum, based on news gathering. It was an amazing place. And they actually went out and interviewed all the living Pulitzer Prize winners. And it was amazing to go there because you could go to these kiosks in the museum and you could play back the story of this photographer in their picture. And it's really impactful when you see how many photographers became very emotional about what they had seen.
Yes, absolutely. And this is also very, very powerful as well, I think. You can go through a little bit of a background on this one.
Yeah, I'd gone down there on the election day in '82 to photograph the elections because it was a major deal, obviously, in El Salvador. And I was staying in a barrio of San Salvador, and I woke up that morning of an election day with a helicopter gunship shooting into our neighborhood. So I threw my clothes on and running over there, and there were two other photographers there in a film crew, and a group of guerrillas that tried to sneak in around one of the election headquarters, and create a skirmish to scare voters away, thinking that would domino and people would stay away from the polls. But a military patrol found them, and it was horrendous. We were watching people being executed in front of us in horrific ways, and in the middle of this whole thing, these soldiers are still kind of in the red zone mentally, and they saw this little shack in the middle where this skirmish was, and they kicked the doors open in the shack, and this young couple was laying on the floor, this woman and her husband, and they were just trembling. They were terrified. They dragged him outside. They were going to shoot him. We had cameras in their faces. We had our cameras in their faces. We had guns in our faces. Finally, decided to let them go. And they're lifting this woman up just as she's fainting from that. And it was one of those moments, like I said, when you're shooting, when you get it. And I was watching that. It's like, oh my God, it's just a very powerful, simple, telling photograph.
Right. Okay, and just a slight technical questions here. I think some of you listeners or viewers may find it quite interesting, because this is obviously shot in the golden days of photography when manual cameras dominated. So this is all manual focus. This you probably presumably stop down, use hyperfocus to snap the shot, and
everything manual, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's no autofocus going on, and people might find it quite interesting. How did you capture that in just a split moment, and in terms of skills wise?
Well, this was shot with again, I love wide angle because I love getting in kind of the zone of what's happening with people, and I think that it allows you to do that. And I think this was a 24, and yeah, it was all manual exposure, manual focus, everything. This was shot on Tri-X. This was, because you'd have to go, when I'd shoot something like this, I had to get back to my room in the hotel and process it and print it and send the pictures back. But this was a major event in the world that day, the election day shootout. But that was a consideration with that, because, if this picture didn't have that just crisp sharpness, it wouldn't have been as powerful, because I think that adds to the horror of it. The two soldiers on either side with their heads down.
Yep.
That poor woman's face looking up to the sky, where it kind of goes back to almost what we look for in photographs. We look for eyes and we look for sharpness. Those are two of the primary things. Highlights are something bright, or what drives our eyes into a photograph. So her face, or that light reflecting on it, and her arms out in front of her, all those become elements that. And again, I could not have shot much tighter because I wanted to bring in some of the background.
Yes,
this is a full frame on the thing. But it was always that, what can I do to make this picture look like I see it in my mind's eye? And this is such fast and rapid decision making you're making, that and this is kind of the danger of it too, because you'd be so
into it,
focused. into the situation
Yeah.
that you had to also be aware of the danger around you. So this is one of those dangers. And that's when I look at the people's work coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan, these places today, and I'm just, like I said, staggered by it, by the intensity and the depth of the work that's coming out of these zones.
Yeah, of course. Wow. Okay, that's certainly interesting. So, okay, we're talking about war. Let's have a look at something slightly different. And like I said, to all of you, Jay has a good varieties of photographs and also like different elements and different things. The next one we're gonna come up is slightly different now. We're gonna go from hot and danger to lonely and white.
And cold. That's right.
And cold. Yes.
Well, this is from this is a series of books that were started in the 80s, actually, called A Day in the Life of Rick Smolin and David Cohen started these books. Rick was the foundation of who I worked with at first. Incredible photographer in his own right. And what they did is they did these books that were, you'd be invited as a photographer to be partake in this. And I think it was 100 of us were invited today in Life of America. And this was the only photo book that was ever #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list. It was on the list in general for over a year. And this book got huge press, but each of us had an assignment. And my assignment was to photograph Mount Washington in New Hampshire in the North American Northeast. It's known for the worst weather in the world. They had winds 231 miles an hour in the 30s there. They have a weather station up there that's like a bunker. And I saw a recent video from up there that was unbelievable of the storm moving through. But my assignment was to photograph that. So I went up there the night before, got up there, it was nice and quiet. The temperatures weren't too bad. And one of the meteorologists called me over. It's a full weather station up there. And he said, look at this front coming in. Yep. And Mount Washington is a perfect point where these wide weather systems focus down. And we had this storm that moved through with sustained minimum 70 to 75 mile an hour winds up to a little over 100. And I'd found this guy from Eastern Mountain Sports Guide Services, and I asked him if he could meet me at the time. This was a few days before the shoot. I said, hey, can you come up there and I want to hike down the mountain. He said, yeah. So, the storm is raging outside that morning. I'm thinking he ain't coming. I look up and here he comes. So my gear and we go walking out. And I'm kind of straggling behind him because I'm not quite as athletic as he is. And I've got my wide angle. I'm walking along. I look up and it's like, oh, that looks so cool. I want a picture that is cold, conveys sparse, conveys kind of a rugged situation. And I thought the elements came together. We like asymmetry in photography. We don't like, rules of thirds and all that. We like that. So I've got the sign off to the left. Kind of pointing to Joe there on the right. He happened to wear a yellow and red, which was absolutely perfect to have those warm colors in that very cold environment. That he's the only warmth in that entire environment. It's almost monochromatic.
Yes.
Not quite, but it just, and again, I think we're successful as photographers when we put our audience into the frame.
Yes, this is certainly interesting, and you mentioned something about rule of third, about composition, and this is certainly interesting to a lot of people, especially many who are just starting out and often trying to study compositions in photography. I noticed something about your photograph is not necessarily following the rules, and I don't think that's a bad thing totally, because in photography I don't think there should be any rules, and as long as it makes sense to the eyes, which to me that's probably a more logical approach, at least for me anyway, and this kind of almost demonstrations of that, and to me I think it's very interesting photograph, and like you said, it's almost monochromatic apart from the person themselves wearing in kind of yellow and orange. This is a magnificent photo, but I think it could also equally work in black and white if you just so happen to have a black and white film. But this is definitely to me makes it work in color, and it's almost like the eyes are drawn to the person walking in the far distance, and everything else is almost it's kind of highlighting the I'm trying to lose words now and then, but it's the the sad things about the particular weather situations, and you kind of highlighted quite perfectly with the frost on the ground and on the signpost, the actual flat tones or the lack of colors certainly make this photograph even more compelling in a way. And he is walking away from it. There's kind of a lot of things going on there, but it certainly makes it really, really interesting to read.
Well, you brought up a whole bunch of stuff, and I'll go back to what. Well, Rod had brought that up earlier about color, black and white, and this kind of is one of those things that I think addresses that, because this could have worked as black and white, but I think it's so essential to have that little warm color of that tiny human in this really cold, harsh environment. That, look out, to me, that's very important. And then going back to the rules of composition and everything else, I think a good photographer, the rules apply until it comes down to the criteria. Does it just work? And I think the better you know the rules, the more you know when to break them.
Yes.
I think very often it's easy to analyze a photograph after it's been taken and say why it worked. It doesn't help you take a good photograph in the first place. There isn't time.
Correct.
I think you have to have that. You have to have that visual instinct in the first place, and anyone can analyze it afterwards. But you have to have the instinct at the time.
You do. And it's a thing that I tell our students in our workshops, that, like, going back to what we talked about earlier, that when that camera goes on around your neck, the moment is possibly now. Because I've had students come up to us on workshops and say, well, you said the event starts at 9 o'clock. It's 10 till. And it's like, no, the event is now. The event is now when that camera's around your neck. And like I said earlier, sometimes the pictures come out of left field. Got to be ready for them. And when you see something that makes you react, if it makes you go, oh wow, if it makes you laugh, if it makes you react on some level, you should think about photographing it, because it's working on some level. It's resonating with you as a person. So your job is to define that, to use the tools at hand to, whether it's a wide angle telephoto, you have all these decisions to make. And it's that, like I said, that constant thought process of, what do I do? What do I use to make this picture work?
Absolutely.
I think.
Sorry, Rod. Sorry.
I was only going to say, I think as well that one of the themes that's very apparent from the pictures we've seen is timing, which is something we don't very often talk about. It's not just about framing composition. It's the moment when everything is in the right place, which I think is the skill that's often overlooked.
It is the critical thing, because everything comes down to moment. Man, I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to preach about that sooner or later.
There you go.
But it does come to the moment. Everything is moment. That previous picture, if you looked at where his feet are spread apart in the hiking pole, if those legs had been together, it wouldn't have worked as well. But you get the feeling of motion. Timing and moment is everything in photography. But see what I'm saying about, look at the legs apart, look at his hiking pole, look at his arm out. Those are those little things. And that's what I tell people when you see a photograph that works to you. Why is that picture working? And break it down. And just as important, when it's not working, why is that not working?
Absolutely.
And you've got it. And the next picture you showed is the same thing. You know, that was a story I shot for Geographic on the Yukon River. And I always say the Geographic would give you every inch of rope in the world to hang yourself with. You know, you're making decisions in the field because you're building the story. You know the theme. You know what you're doing thematically. But they give you here's what I want to do. So I was photographing Yupik up in the upper Yukon Delta, and these people hunt and fish whales and seals in traditional methods with atlatls and kind of primitive tools. This is a harpoon, which ain't too primitive, but I kind of thought this picture existed, and I decided I was going to spend time because I thought and I was looking for one photograph, and I thought this picture existed. And I thought, well, I'm going to give myself this many days. And it got to the last day, and I was sweating bullets because it hadn't come to fruition. And we got out early in the morning. These boats, they've got these Yukon Raiders, they're called. They're long boats, and they've got 130 horsepower engines on them. And this was absolute mayhem, and people say, well, that picture is Photoshop. No, it wasn't. That was on film. It was Velvia, which I love Velvia because it looked like how your memory saw the image. Kodachrome was more accurate. Velvia, more of a memory attached look to it. But things are happening just so fast, and these boats are racing around, the SEALs trying to get away, and this one boat pulls up in front of me, and the guy lifts a harpoon, and the fog was lifting off the Yukon at that moment, and the SEAL had just gone under, and everything came together, and just pressed a shutter. It was like, holy moly, this could be it. And we use this as a main photograph in the opener. The story was on the Yukon River, and essentially who these people are that live on the river, and how do they exist? Because this is a 2,000-mile long river with, at the time, 2 bridges crossing it, and those were remote bridges anyway. So this is a remote environment. So we were trying to convey that, and I just love this image because it conveys sense of place, and it combines moment. And sense of place is critical for a geographic story, because you had to show and explain to your viewers visually what's important about this place. So we used this on a big gatefold in the magazine. We had a different picture on the other side. But this is what I loved about working with geographic, because when you're in a story, is that I would be working with my photo editor, and we'd break down, because I shot this story over many months. And you'd go back about halfway through the story, and you do an interim show where we'd show our editors 30 photographs. You've shot for several months. That's the tough part, is to whittle it down to those 30 images that have connectivity about narrative, but explains a story. Then you come in at the end of the shoot and do the same thing, including pictures from that first shoot.
Yep.
But this was, to me, such a simple, powerful picture that everything was kind of coming together in it. But just, Rod, like you said, man, just moment is everything. And sometimes it's a big, loud moment like this, or the wide receiver going up for a pass in American football, or it's a real quiet moment and you and I talking and my flipping my hand out like that, which goes back to that issue I was talking about with the iPhone. You just can't see that subtlety of moment.
Yeah, but I think you mentioned quite a few things there. I think this should be a lesson for a lot of different photographers, especially those who want to get into photojournalism and also documentary. And it's not always just about one photograph. It's a series of photographs. It's a body of work that tells the story from the beginning to the end. You should have some introductions, details, then you have a climax where the signature shot basically expose everything that you wanted to tell, and or for that particular kind of like special magical moment. And I think this is really important for a lot of photographers, because so often these days many would just think that, oh, I need just one shot, but it's not just that one shot. And a good wedding photographer will tell you that no, it's not always about that one shot. It's about the whole day. It's about kind of like all the different elements within the whole wedding itself.
Completely.
Yeah, it's not simple just one or two good photographs or great photographs. It's not just about that. You need to have the associated photographs that's surrounding the whole piece, and to make sense of everything that's happening around from the beginning to the end. Then you get a whole story there, and when you flip through the photo book at the end of the day, and you find, wow, that's what happened there, and this is what everything's going on. And I think that's the magical thing about it.
It is, and a lot of photojournalists, because a lot of newspapers are dying, a lot of photojournalist friends of mine have gone into wedding photography, and they've done it with a narrative approach, with the photojournalistic approach. I judged a contest several years ago, the Wedding Photographers WPP, I forgot what it is, Wedding Photojournalists of America.
Yep.
I was astounded by the quality of work and exactly what you're saying of building a narrative. And it's the same thing. You've got to have that intro shot. And I always tell people, to me, there's 5 components of visual narrative. You've got to create a sense of place. 1. Yep. 2, you have to introduce your cast of characters. 3, you have to introduce details, a hand on the ring or it's whatever else. Number 4, which is my favorite, you have to have moment.
Yes.
Which is the power, which is the energy. And then you have to close your story out. So those 5 components, I think I got them all, are critical to narrative. And narrative, and anytime we shoot 2 or more pictures in any situation, you can enter that world of visual narrative of telling the story. And
Yeah.
it's far better to slideshow or a body of work or a presentation with 40 to 50 images that leaves your audience with their jaws around their knees. They know what the place looks like and smells like and feels like.
Yep.
Than trying to show 1,000 pictures from your trip to wherever, and your audience by 3 pictures in know this is going to be a brutal night.
Yep.
It's that powerful narrative.
Yeah, but I think it's good. You know, like for anyone who listening right now or watching, and I think the next assignment for you guys or next exercise for you guys, if you go on a trip, even a normal day trip going out and about, try to employ this approach. You know, obviously you're not necessarily or guarantee you're going to have a great photograph at the end, but it's a good practice where you kind of document your journey from the beginning to the end. You come back. It's almost writing a little storybook, you know, like, oh, how do you start it? How do you, you're going to find your character. And having said that, this is also a good exercise for those as well who are going out, let's say, do street photography. First, think about what you want to capture. You set yourself a goal, set yourself something you want to aim at. Then you go out with a purpose. Then you go out and you look for those shots rather than randomly strolling around your local streets or something like that, because those random shots, it could come across really well. It could be a great photograph on its own, but what we are talking about now in trying to compose a story altogether that you can actually make sense. So then that way, when you look back, is 20 photos for that particular day, you say, oh, wow, I summarized that quite well. This is a really, really good exercise for anyone who's going out and starting to do this sort of journalism work and storytelling work even. And that is actually quite a fun thing to do once you success.
Oh, it's wonderful to do. And I even actually keep a list sometimes, either mentally or a written list. Okay, here's my sense of place pictures. Here's what I've got. But you've got to be ready to make sure that you don't miss something that comes out of left field. This is from a shoot I did on the fires at Yellowstone way back. This is for Geographic. It's just one of those moments that I happened to be there when the fire moved through around Old Faithful Lodge, which was amazing to see. These fires were massive, beyond comprehension. They were so big. But this was one of those situations where look at those elements, the fire hose spraying out of the thing, the one guy wiping his brow. That's that little subtlety, Rod, again, of that little bitty moment. It's an okay picture. I don't think it's a great picture, but it's got the elements that are relevant. It's a moment, and it's got the huts in the background they're trying to protect, and it's got the fire raging coming over the hill. So it's just got those simple moments that make it work pretty well.
Yes. It's certainly, and I like the color combination as well. And this actually, I really quite enjoy these photographs here. And it's because of the light, how the light shapes the rim lights around each subjects there at in the middle of the frame. That really kind of works it really well.
You've got it. And that's what worked so well on. You've got good taste in photographs there, Jimmy. I'll tell you. This is a favorite. This is one of my first big shoots for Geographic. I spent 3 months in Papua New Guinea, and it was on an area of the rainforest that the government was trying to decide whether it turned over to logging interests or turn into a national park. So it was kind of the whole rainforest thing in microcosm. But we worked in an area of the country. I worked with the Bishop Museum out of Hawaii, and we put together a team, and we did a 6-week expedition into this area. And no humans, as far as I could tell, had been in there because the locals considered it a very spiritual area. So it was amazing. But one afternoon we'd set up camp, and I walked back out to the river where these guys were spearfishing. And it's like, oh my God, this is kind of one of those layered photographs that you've got, the guy in the foreground that finishes off that left side of the frame. He's kind of in the rule of the third lower part.
Yep.
Then your eye trails off to the background, and you've got that incredibly cool light ray coming from the right. You've got the guy below the light ray with his hand on the water looking for fish. So to me, I really like this photograph when we use this prominently in the story. If I'd shot it with the sun over my shoulder, it would have been a pretty boring photograph. But it's one of these things, okay, I'm going to go do this really strong side lighting, exposing for the highlights so that it's almost I forget the chair, can't remember the term, but it's almost like that film noir type thing where it's a really dark image where light just paints on where you want the information, where the relevant, and you've got lighting the bottom of the river too, so you know, wow, this is really clear water. And it was incredible because there was these not seen humans, and these poor fish on the first day we were there, they didn't swim away, they just stayed right there. So we had fish for dinner a couple of nights.
Yep. And that this is absolutely really cool as well. And another lesson for photographers is actually trying to work with the lights. And this particular photograph here is a good example how to work with the light. And then this, because in here you can clearly, when we always say about photography, you know, the meaning of photography, the word itself is light painting, it's light drawing, and this is a very, very good example of light painting. The light draws the subject in this particular case because the rim light itself is highlighting each individual in the shot, all the pose that they're holding, catching fish, and the light reflecting from the bottom of the river. It just works in here, and I think this is a really, really good example of what a photograph is. So this is perfect. I think it's really good.
Thanks.
I think it's interesting. I'm guessing this was shot on manual as well. I'm guessing you're a fan of manual exposures, because I've got a feeling if you'd shot this on auto, it would have been about 5 stops overexposed. So,
that's a great
think there
point,
are many.
because it would have,
I think there are many situations where we assume our meters know best, and they certainly don't. Still have to use your eyes and use your judgment. It's I think many people would consider that a nuisance, but it's true.
But it's that thing of problem solving. What is going to work on this situation? Because we get people ask me all the time, what exposure mode do you use? What shutter speed should I use? And the answer to that is always, it depends. What are you trying to do? You know, this picture, like you said, if I shot just a matrix exposure metering system on this, it would have tried to have brought the shadows up, which would have been what its job is to do. But this is one, if I'd shot this with, and I metered it, this was with a hand meter, and I metered it because I knew exactly what I wanted the light to look like. Look at the light on the guy in the left foreground. It's perfect on him. And if it had been overexposed any, the highlights would have completely gone. You would have had good exposure on them, but it would have killed the photograph. And the water, seen through the water in the background, that's on the dead perfect exposure. So it really comes down to try to understand your equipment so well that it gets out of the way. You know, as much as the camera's a tool, all it is. And I hate it when I see forums talking about my camera is better than yours for this. You know, it's like, come on, it's a tool. And the more your tools, the better you're going to be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish.
Absolutely.
It'd be rather like carpenters. I was just saying, be rather like carpenters arguing over the pitch of their saw blades, saying, "Oh, you need a so-and-so pitch. You don't need that pitch. My saw's better than yours."
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, come on.
So speaking of light, and this is another great photograph as well, and to me it's magnificent. And this one you work with the light so well in this particular case. It's got two really kind of high contrast ratios here. You got the bright kind of I presume is a morning light, and on top of the actual mast itself, and then you got the darker areas in the bottom left corner, and somehow this shot just balances so well without overpowering each other, and I think it's a really phenomenal photo.
Thanks. This was shot. I've had the incredible luxury of getting to photograph the Taj Mahal many times, and we went there early one morning, and we walk in, and I usually show this picture with another one before it because it's this bank of fog, and you see this little spire, the Taj Mahal, sticking up. So things aren't as you hope, and that's what I'm saying. You've got to be ready for left field. So I knew that the Western Mosque at the Taj Mahal was a beautiful building. So I walked up the Taj, walked around the apron at the bottom of it to this overlook. And this is fog from a Yamuna River that's just starting to lift. And the Western Mosque is just starting to get this early light. It's like, oh, that is so incredibly cool. And then I think it's, you live a good life, you do things right. Serendipity happens to you every now and then, because I'm shooting this. And listen, these two guys walk into the frame to take a picture from there. It's like, there's my photograph. If it were without him, it'd be a perfectly okay, nice photograph. But I think that certain elements come in that can elevate it. And I think,
Yes.
every good photographer is brutal about their own work. If it's good, those pictures, it stays with me. If it's not, I want to say goodbye to it. But
Yeah.
this is one, and it's funny because I certain pictures always said like having a body of work is like being a owner of an apartment building. You're going to have residents, tenants that come in. You want to get them out as soon as possible, but you're going to have those tenants that come in. I want you there forever, and that's kind of a body of work portfolio is a very dynamic condition.
Yeah.
It's changing constantly. It's morphing constantly. It's based on who the client is and who you're showing it to. How the heck do you decide which pictures are going to be in your body of work? It's always that conundrum. But this picture, I like it. It still works to me. It's got the nice elements. And Rod, going back, I think this would be interesting to see this in black and white. I've never converted it, but I think the warm hue of that palette becomes a critical component of this photograph.
It is, and I think those two little people at the bottom left corner kind of gave the perspective and then the scale, and it just
completely
it makes it really interesting.
It's a balance, isn't it? But I can quite see it a camera club, for example, some I've been to, where somebody will say, "Oh, I've got software that could get those two annoying people out of that shot." So if somebody said to you,
yes.
if somebody said to you, one of these places, "Oh yeah, it's not a bad picture, but there's a couple of fellas in the bottom corner that are ruining it," what do you say to
that you
people
may not have
who don't
right.
who don't interpret visually the way that you do? Because this happens all the time to photographers, doesn't it?
Yeah, completely. And if somebody says that, all you can do is agree with them. You're right. I ought to take them out of there. But to me, it becomes but it's interesting. But this is also, I read once, not only do we look for eyes and sharpness, but diagonal becomes a very important thing. And that's a very diagonal photograph.
Yeah. So
And
the next photograph is really cool. This is really cool.
Well, this is from Myanmar, which, my heart breaks with what's going on in Myanmar today. It's just horrible. I won't go into the political thing, but this is on Inle Lake, traditional net fishermen. And it's one of these things, well, I'm going to use a framing device on this. So I've got this incredible net this guy is using and shooting through it with a 14 millimeter. The sun's just coming up. I've got that tiny little almost sunburst going on, which I think kind of balances out that little part of the frame. So again, it's what I tell aspiring photographers, when something really cool is going on, we all tend to forget the edges of the frame. We look at in the center at what's going on. We tend to center it. And that's just so human. But what I say is, center the thing, shoot it, but then immediately start thinking, what's wrong with this? What can I do to improve? Well, I'm going to put the guy off to the side a little bit. I'm going to let this incredible structure, this frame, come in on left and right. And it's building the photograph. It's being, don't miss the moment, shoot the darn moment, but then keep the camera to your eye for a second and think, what can I do to improve this? Maybe that initial shot you made, that's it. But work the situation.
Absolutely. And I think that this is another really good example about leading viewers' eyes to your subject or focus. And because people often talk about, the light, then you have to use leading lines and you have to use shapes and forms to do that. But clearly, those are, general rules. And when you come to more becoming more experienced and you start to do it slightly more creatively, then you start to look for things that would do a similar thing. And in this is a good example for that, because you're using the nets to actually direct viewers' eyes to the subject. And quite naturally, because you tuck the camera right in there, and there are, even when you stop, they can clearly see that the closest rope or string on the left side of the frame is out of focus. It gives you that kind of perspective and also the depth in this particular photograph, and then that would immediately draw your eye straight into whatever is showing in the middle of the or at the end of the net. So this is quite a good example for that. It's very good example for those who are looking for a slightly more creative way to frame the photograph or direct the viewer's eyes. I think it's a really good one.
Yeah, and I think I love quirky photographs. I love trying to, bring something to the viewer that surprises them. And I think that's, again, that element of surprise is one of those elements like humor and everything else. They're like, wow, oh. And if you get them, if they stop to look at your photograph, then you've got them. Yes. And then that's the whole thing of you're showing a narrative, then going on to the next picture. What is that connectivity that carries them on to the next frame?
Yes, absolutely. And now let's have a look at the next one. I think it's quite like this one. So this is this is very colorful.
Yes, it is. Yeah, this is the in St. Petersburg. It's the Church of the Sacred Blood, I think it is. Somebody's going to correct me on that rightfully. But I think this was either with my Olympus or it's with a cell phone. And it's a panorama of the ceiling of this church, and it's just incredible. And again, like I said, I use whatever tool that I have in my bag that's going to give me the image I'm looking for. And obviously on this place, it's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So I'm actually, when I suggest, and think of that, because and actually I shot this vertical, but it's like, well, I like this horizontal. But and if you're shooting a panoramic with your iPhone, one of these, a ceiling shot, one thing I suggest is put the camera way behind your head to start with. Start the panoramic, because if you go the other way, your body is shaking like this by the time you get to that. So you start at the toughest point and then make the clean sweep. But I thought this was a photograph that just really, this situation was one that demanded a panoramic because it brought in all that cool, incredible painting and architecture and tile work and everything. Just surrealistic.
Absolutely. And the next one I'm going to show before we're going to start showing some of your latest work, and is this one here. I love this. Oh,
thank good. Yeah, this is in the Southern Ocean. I've done a lot. I've had the incredible good fortune to do a lot of work through geographic and Lindblad expeditions in the South Georgia, Antarctica, Falklands. So I can't even go on enough about how great that trip is. But we're transiting, and the seas can be really rough. I mean, really rough. I've made trips down there. We were in 40-foot seas, which I have no pride. I got sea. But we're in the Southern Ocean going between Falklands and South Georgia, and we're in this almost hurricane level wind. And I look over to the side, and there's these waves cresting in front of this ice, and it's like, oh, that's just so ethereal. But again, the moment in this is that wave peeking out there just left of center, just the little fingers of it reaching to the sky. And this is one of those things, again, the more you know your equipment, well, I need to shoot it 1,250th of a second because I know that water is really moving fast. We've got 70-mile-an-hour winds ripping across all these elements. So I just love the energy of that moment there. Yeah.
That there is, and I think what make me like this photo is that it's got a contrasting energy there. You got the really strong and kind of fierce waves kind of crashing in the foreground, and then you got this really calm and soft light in the background. It's a big contrast there, and to me it just makes it kind of surreal, in a way that it just look at this and say, oh wow, it just how could that happen? You got such a calmness at the back, and you got this like ferocious high energy wave bashing in front of you, just in the foreground. It's just amazing. And to me, it's a really good contrast here.
Well, it's that kind of the yin yang thing of bringing those elements into a photograph, using the dichotomy of, just like you said, of the energy of that wave and just that quietness of that ice and that soft light. So again, it's just that you're trying to visually describe the magic of what you're seeing in front of the camera.
Yeah, and also, like another thing that I like as well is because everything is blue. It's different shades of blue here, and then it's kind of cool in a way that it's almost monochromatic, but it's just in blue instead of obviously black and white. But it's just different shades of blue in here, and that's not even a single bit of white in here. It's everything just blue, so it's actually kind of interesting.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, that is very, very interesting. So let's have a look at some of your latest work, shall we? I think we're coming towards the end of your presentation. I couldn't showcase all of it, Jace. I apologize because you have so many. You have so many. I'm having a tough time trying to find something, and just to,
okay. Well, if
to show
anybody's
people.
but if anybody's in the Denver area, there's a great thing here going on called Denver Month of Photography in Colorado. There's 500 exhibiting photographers, and looking at my notes, there's 50 participating spaces. There's 100 events. It's wrapping up actually tomorrow. I had my work in a gallery called the Nitsa Knoll Gallery, and I've got some current work and old stuff. But anyway, yeah, this is current. This was shot on one of my first trips after COVID for Geographic. It's in the Antarctic. We were out on the ice. That's the Geographic ship, Lindblad ship in the background, the Endurance, named after Shackleton's boat.
All right.
And
okay.
we're out on the, yeah, and I'm out on the boat, out on the ice and looking around for a picture. And all of a sudden look behind us and here comes this penguin. And this had been 2 years that COVID had occurred and there'd been nothing going on in the Antarctic since then or during that time. So very likely this penguin had never seen a human or a ship before. And I know it came out, it was looking around, oh my God, look at this. And I can just imagine it going back to its group of friends saying, you aren't going to believe what I just saw. But it's really just such a quite good little moment of, this human intrusion in the background with all the people. And just that little separation I put above the penguin's head, I thought was important to give breathing space around it. So you see the line of people going across in the back.
Yeah. It's very funny photo as well. It's got a little bit of humor to it. I kind of find it quite cute. And the next one, lovely.
That's from one of our workshops we do in Wyoming. It's late day afternoon, a couple of riders riding off. We'd been photographing some things and they were heading back to put the horses up for the evening. And we had this outrageous sky and it's like, okay, what's the powerful thing in this? Well, the horses are cool. The sky is equally as cool. Let's minimize the horses to the bottom, giving the viewer credit that they're going to get to the horses. They're going to see the horses. There's such a strong graphic part of this. Yep. But going back to moment, if I'd had those horses' legs together, it wouldn't have worked as well. So, and a lot of people that photograph horses, this is a important component. You don't want a pogoing horse. So have those legs apart, tails up in the air with a little bit of swish, and that incredible sky above them, but also with the landscape that kind of goes left or right across the bottom.
Yeah. And this is another aspect that not many photographers talk about, and is the use of negative space, and this is the prime example of that. And then we earlier we talked about using creative framing to direct viewers' eyes, and negative space in fact is also another kind of useful tools that you can have in terms of composition to create that. And in this particular case, the sky is the negative space, is relatively empty. It's got a little bit of textures to it, got a little bit of colors to it, but then ultimately, because you can see with the direction of the clouds, and then it will shift your eyes downward and start to look at the darker things, which are the horses. So it's actually a very good way of leading viewers when they're reading the photograph itself. It's a good really good mix, and this is why I like Jay's photograph, and it's a really good kind of mix of different style and different things going, and I really admire your photography, Jay.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that greatly.
Let's look at the next one. Yeah,
that's very bold framing on a previous shot.
Let's go back to it.
Have very personal ways of framing shots, don't they? So you cut that very, very close to the rocks. That would make me nervous. But I guess we all see things differently, don't we?
But that's the wonder of it, and that's why going back, and I'm not trying to promote my work, but that's one thing we tell our participants, that's one of the benefits, is we're all shooting, the 10 participants, we're all shooting the same thing. And I've had complaints early in the workshops, we're all shooting the same thing. It's like there's a reason for that, because you're going to see how Mary saw it, who saw how Josephine saw who shot Opes, and it's like, to me, an educational component. And this was an unframed picture, and Rod, you put it dead. I mean, I'm framing that at the bottom as close as I possibly can get, because I didn't want to. You don't want to intrude on the legs or the little bit of landscape you've got in there. And like you said, the negative space, but also the leading lines of the clouds that point to the horses, pretty much.
Yes.
So those elements came together. And boy, howdy, I'll tell you what, that scene changes by the second when you're watching. Like I said, the horse's legs all of a sudden pogo become one. There's a three-legged horse or a two-legged horse. So you're watching all those elements are things you're looking for. You're looking for the framing. You're looking for the moment. This is not shot on a tripod. So the camera's kind of in flux all the time, moving slightly. So it's just that constant thing, being aware of what's going on in the viewfinder.
Absolutely. And this is the beauty of photography, right? You know, like we all interpret things very differently, you know, like this is why we can all stand on the same spot, but we can all end with very, very different photographs.
Yep.
Okay, let's go to the next one. And where is it now? And I think I'm going to have this one here. This is cute.
Yeah, now this one I did crop, obviously, but we're in Chobe River in Botswana, and it's unbelievable. I mean, how you can't go wrong there. Just pick, the elephants. We're pulling up the first day to get to our houseboat, and these elephants are in the water. It's like, oh my God. You pick the camera up and you watch, and there's these egrets standing on the elephants. Like, well, that's a cool combination. So we've got a picture of the egret sitting on the elephant in the water. That's a B- picture. It's good. It's good. But you keep the camera to your eye. The elephant's blowing water on its back. The egret's kind of reacting. It looks like it's getting blown off the elephant at that point. And to me, oh, that's a cool moment. But look at the important diagonal aspect of the wings on the bird too.
Yeah.
That kind of complement the trunk on the elephant.
Yes. Almost like dancing there.
Exactly. Yeah. Do a little jig on the elephant's head.
Absolutely.
And just, sunsets are, sunsets are usually like, oh, another sunset. But to me, this is in an area called Rhino Camp in Namibia in the Palmwag concession, at one of my favorite places on earth. And this was the most lush I'd ever seen. They'd had a lot of rain. This was last year and had a lot of rain. And it just was an environment I'd not seen like that before. And I love the this was shot with that Olympus 150-400, which is the coolest thing since canned beer. But by shooting a long lens like that, you bring the size of the sun up. So I like the whole thing of sun with the mountain range in the background, and it's almost trite, but I think kind of the elements make it an okay picture.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that to the next one here. This is something I also find it quite interesting here as well. This one.
This is in Kolmanskop. It's in Namibia. It's an old diamond mining town from the early 1900s. It was a beautiful little town. It was built in German style. It was a German diamond mining town. That the diamond pipe started, the amount of diamonds to be mined started decreasing. So they just abandoned the place. It's a national park now, and you can go into these beautiful old homes where the desert is taking back over the building. So it's just an incredible place and it's great to go early in the morning. People visit during the day. We had permits to get in early, so you have that nice morning light coming in. I love the door, and I like the little bit of light in the background and the sand inside the door, because I read once that in photography we see doors and windows as portals, and there'd better be something going on through that portal to keep your viewers' interest. So not only as a window or door can it be cool, but you almost have to have a narrative or some information within that. So I like it that your eye kind of goes to fruition in that background. I've got the top of the frame of the door in there and that incredibly cool sand. So it's just a simple picture, I think is pretty nice.
It is simple, but there's also something about your eyes, looking at this, and I'm intrigued by the symmetry in this particular photograph. I don't know if everyone sees this, yeah? If you look at the door and its shadow to the left of the frame here, it's actually kind of the equal space on either side. So this is actually, even though it's not a center shot, you know, the door is not in the center of the frame, but if you look at the overall presentation, it's actually dead center. So this is what interests me, and like you said, the flow of the sand from through the door in the background to the foreground, it just creates this kind of interesting, almost like a montage photo where you stuck a few photos together, and then it's certainly very interesting to me, and I really like enjoying this one.
Well, I like how the sand kind of. Go ahead, Gerard. Sorry.
I was only going to say, I think the interesting thing about composition is that you can have all sorts of about symmetry, leading lines, framing, rule of thirds. That's fine, but they never arrive one at a time. You've always got two or three or four of these factors in an image, and you can't. And I think if you try and pick out these rules, you can oversimplify things and spoil your appreciation of a scene. You can make things too simple and not see the subtlety in a picture. If that makes sense.
I mean, but that makes complete sense because it's a simple picture with a lot of intricate stuff going on. There's a lot of elements going on in what looks like initially, and Jimmy, you pointed it out, Rod, you pointed it out, that these elements, it's a simple picture, but if you look at it, there's a lot of stuff going on in here that you, the photographer, are responsible for bringing these things together into one frame, to 1/500th of a second or 125th, whatever it was, that to make all those elements come together. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier, and we all said is, you know those rules of composition so well that you know when to break them or when to bring them together in kind of a serendipitous moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, if you use the normal kind of generic rules that a lot of photographers, when they start starting out, and apply to this photograph, and they would basically stand right in the center of the door frame, and then they would just basically snap there. But if you do that, you realize that everything else wouldn't make sense at all, even though the door would open wider, and because the shadow, where the shadow was casting, and everything like that is so this is something that the photographer will have to make, the decision he or she has to make this photograph present in a way that they really want. And I actually find it extremely interesting. So now bringing the next one here. I love this one. This is amazing.
This is one of those ones I shot this last summer at one of our workshops, our Wyoming workshop. And this was a new event that they said, oh, you may want to photograph this. And I saw it and I was like, oh my God, yes. And it was one of those things, you can shoot horizontal, you can shoot vertical. And it's that constant decision making. And it's like, to me, this one, this is without question a vertical. And again, I think that horse on the left, the power of that leg coming up and the mane coming back, the 2-3 horses behind it with the horse up behind it, a little bit of breathing room behind that group with the nose of the other horse coming in there with a little bit of dust coming up, kind of almost S-curving up to where they came from. So sometimes I think you've got to, it benefits your photograph if you give the information from where your subject is coming from. Well, and then you could shoot it another time. Well, there's a picture, it's a horizontal picture of just a group of horses.
Yeah.
So it's that, I just keep going back to, it's that constant decision making. What is going to make the elements work in the photograph?
And also this photograph, you can actually see the layering building up, which is quite cool. You got to really further back to the top of the frame there. That's the furthest point, and then you got a middle ground, and then you got a foreground where the majority of the horses in focus there. So, but like you said, this is an amazing photo. You can actually chop it in a few different pieces. Like it's almost like 3 photographs, photographs stuck together. I'm going to try and enlarge it so you can see what I mean.
Totally.
So like this is like you can
so
basically this is one photograph already. This is amazing, and then you can actually have this. This is another great one here. This is like amazing. This is really cool. And of course, you can have multiple things going on. You can crop it slightly differently. Let's say do a 4x5, 4x3 here. It will be like this. And there's another great one here. So this is how, you know, like you said, a photographer have to make that decision. What should I do? Should I do vertical, do a 3x2, 4x3, do a square, or you can chop this entire frame into 3 pieces or 2 pieces. There's so many things going on there.
But I always tell photographers, and I've said this a few times, they're in wildlife and sports, the rules don't apply, but trying to crop when you shoot makes you learn to see more photographically, which I think enriches your life in general. When you walk into a situation, you know, people tell me, you hear this, all photographers hear the line when you're in front of a beautiful landscape. Oh, don't you just put the camera and enjoy the landscape? Well, a good photographer, the camera has taken me that much more deeply into that scene. I see the beauty of it, but the camera lets me, oh my God, look at that. And then you start to, well, what is drawing me into this scene? Well, it's this, it's light falling this way. Oh, it's that sagebrush. A sagebrush is essential in this picture because that's the American West. The trees, the dust is critical, all these elements. So, and like I keep saying to people, don't miss a darn moment, but cropping when you shoot is a way to make you a better photographer.
Right. There's golden words for you. Okay, this is another interesting one.
Yeah, this was in last December. We did a workshop in the Inside Passage, Alaska. And first day we were out, I chartered this incredible boat, the Northern Song. It's a small yacht. It was 6 participants and ourselves, my wife and I. And the first day we went out and the winds were so great, we couldn't get out of a cove. We just had to sit there and it's like, oh my gosh, I went one day out of 7. Got up the next morning, the captain said, name is Dennis Rogers. He said, I know a place that's going to be great. Motored around to that. And it's great when you have a guide or a participant in these that sees and understands photography, because he understands the power of backlighting on this. And we got to this spot, and these whales, like, again, you lead a good life and a good heavens, or you do something right, you know, and things happen in front of you. But it's also that being aware and giving the instructions to the person too. They understand what we're looking for. Let's go over this way a little bit. Oh, let's get the boat over here. But the 3 working elements in that is the background, including the sun, the fog lifting off the water, and obviously the tail fluking of the humpback right there with the water pouring off of it. Again, a simple picture. Everything's very vertical in this, in a horizontal picture. It's all the prime elements are very, very vertical, but it's still a horizontal picture.
Yes, it is. It is. And it's quite interesting that you do this, because some photographer may say, oh, why don't you just zoom all the way in just to that, you know, concentrating on the tail. Yeah. and then, but I think, you know, that's different interpretations. But this is actually quite interesting because, like you said, I like the fog being lifted there and kind of have that little separations in different levels. It just kind of cool here. Let's look at the next one.
I think one of the issues facing people today, or photographers today, is what I get all the time is when you're choosing how to crop an image, it changes for every medium that it's used on. So, for example, if I do some images from a camera review, they need to be at the camera's original aspect ratio in a review, say 3:2 or 4:3. If there's a feature image for an article on a website, it needs to be 16:9, and we have this dreadful, very wide aspect ratio for our headshots reviews, which is 21:9. So I think perhaps these, I know. So perhaps these days we don't always have the luxury as photographers of choosing a crop. Sometimes we have one forced upon us. Does that happen to you?
Absolutely. And I think, I completely agree. And you have all these options. And that's where it goes down to every picture is a separate event. What do I do in this? Well, look at this. Well, and then all of a sudden it's given within the context of this particular group of photographs of whales in Southeast Alaska on the Inside Passage, you kind of give your audience credit. They're going to know what this is. You don't have to be literal to have, you've got a little bit of a whale coming up, a tail fluking a little bit. The 4 exhalations, the spouts going on with going from weakening on the left to the third one being the most powerful one, to the other one being kind of the beginning. But it just gave again, to me, a little bit of it's a nice picture. It's okay. It's like a grade B picture, but I just like the anticipation kind of going on in this picture. It's almost like watching a video. It's like, here's the instruction set for the whales on their book on how to blow their spouts.
Yep, absolutely, and it's certainly very, very cool there. Let me just try to bring in another one, and I think is this one here. That's another bit whale shot. It's another moment shot.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, this one, breaching whales, a lot of people have, and it's a cool picture to get. I still love getting breaching whales, and this was an amazing event. When we pulled up to the time we finally left, this whale breached 47 times. And so obviously if you miss it, you got problems. You shouldn't be in this craft anyway. But what I like about this picture is the sharpness of it, because you see its fin with that incredible water coming off of it. You see its undersides with that incredible detail. We were fortunate to have overcast that day. And the nice thing about that, because the dynamic range, if it had been direct sunlight, it would have been too harsh. It would have been blocked up. The highlights would have been blown out. The dynamic range, the ability of the camera to capture light to dark, would have been extended beyond what the camera could have captured. But with the overcast, that compresses this dynamic range and allows everything to be in kind of the same light value. So it's like, oh, look at that. All those cool elements are able to be seen to the eye.
Yes.
And again, it's that power of still photography that it freezes forever, that moment in history. So we have that luxury to come back and look at it at a later time, study all the incredible little intricacies of what's going on.
Absolutely, and I really, really like. And I think let's show the last photos. Let's
oh,
like
good choice. Yeah, this was shot about a month ago. I was on that geographic trip, and we're in Nepal. We're at this amazing temple called Pashupatanath, and I'm probably mispronouncing that. I apologize. It's a Hindu temple. It's one of the most revered sites in the Hindu world. Cremations go on there. People come in to watch it. It's an 11th century original building. There are a lot of sadhus, which are holy men, and this gentleman's one of the holy men there. And I've been there a number of times, to the point where a lot of these sadhus know me by first name, which I think has got to be good in the grand scheme of things in life, that if a holy man knows you by first name, you've got some good cachet going into heaven, if that's where you're headed. But anyway, this guy, I saw this guy, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And I'm walking around, I'm talking to him, and I'm trying to remember the name. I don't remember the name of the buildings in the background, but site. But he stopped and he's talking to me. I look at him, it's like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely perfect. The light on him was perfect because it was a open shade, but it was not so bright that it overpowered the shadow detail in the background. And I like the repetition of form going off in the background.
Yes.
The light on him was absolutely perfect. The sharpness on him, the color, the palette. This would not have worked in black and white anywhere as well as this broad palette of colors. And him looking directly to the camera, I think, forces the engagement between viewer and him. Kind of like you look at this picture to begin with.
Yes.
Your eyes go to his, and then your eyes kind of take in the rest of the photograph. So it was a picture I really liked. I just thought, oh, it works. It works.
Yes.
And I think it comes down to, it's real simple in photography. It works or it doesn't work.
Yes, absolutely. Well, okay. This is probably one of the last photos I want to show the audience today, and absolutely, you know what, I actually have a lot more to show, but I think that I don't want everybody starting to become a stone statue at the end of it. And but yes, it's amazing. I mean, I wish I have more time to do that, but let's reserve some time to answer some questions, shall we? And I think this people may have some questions. If you have any, please drop a comment, then we shall pick it up. But I do have a few to ask you, Jay, if I may. And First of all, and we after looking at your some of the photographs there we just showed, and a lot of people would question that, is luck part of the elements in photography? Because I'm speaking from a more from a moment kind of thing, like you got to be in the right place at the right time. Things have to happen at that moment, then you capture it. Obviously there's several skills going on there, but also about luck elements there. People always ask about this question.
Sure, absolutely, luck plays a part of it. One, I'll answer that with a direct quote and steal from a photographer friend of mine, Jim Richardson, who's an amazing photographer. He said, if you want to take better pictures, put yourself in front of better things. And it really is true. And luck does play a component. Then to borrow another quote, Arnold Palmer was once asked, the American golfer, like, how can you be so lucky? And he said, well, I found the more I practice, the luckier I get. So the more that you shoot, the more you're cognizant of what's going on the other side of the camera, and putting yourself in front of potentially good situations. Absolutely, certainly. But then the onus falls upon the photographer to watch for that moment. And like I said, it can be a big and loud one. It can be a real quiet one. So all those elements come together. You've got to be out there. You've got to have the camera on your neck. You've got to have maybe a certain element of luck. You've got to know your equipment so well that you're ready for it. But you've got to be aware of what's going on, because a good photograph is foreground, background, all the components, it's the edges of the frame, all those things. So it's, and Ansel Adams, when he shot his pictures, had a certain amount of luck, but he knew what he was looking for. Danny Lyons, who's one of my favorite photographers, I look at his work, and he put himself into the Texas prison system to photograph the death row, and they never let a photographer in again after that. But it was building upon what he had presented to him. It was taking advantage of what he had presented to him and bringing his expertise and skill and his knowledge to the forefront, that he understood moment and composition and the exact framing. That you look at those photographs of his, and it's rare when you see photographs that are perfect. I mean, I still look at those photographs, oh my God, those are perfect. So all those elements play a part, but it comes down to the photographer to execute it at the end.
Yes, absolutely. And I truly believe that. And like you said, and if you want to capture a shot, if you want to capture that moment, you got to be in there, in a position where you can take that photograph at first. And many people have forgotten that, and then they say, oh, you're just lucky to capture that shot. But look, he's actually there to take that photograph. If you want to take that, if you see something that interests you in your eyes, you think this is going to be a good frame, why don't you just stand there or go back there, revisit it, have a look at the frame, have a look at the environments, have a look at the light, go back there every single day, and I can guarantee you will have one shot that is going to be amazing.
I think.
Well, you feel back
very often you'll get people saying to you, "How did you get that shot?" And you find yourself saying, "Well, I went there." And that's it. You have
that's
to
a big
be there.
part of it. Yeah, you have to be there. That says it all. You've got to be there, and that's what.
Yeah.
It's like, I hate getting up early, but you've got to get out early sometimes. And once you get out there, then you have that opportunity to make it.
Yes.
Boy, I've got all my quotes that I love, but Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player, said, you're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And it really does explain it well, that you've got to be there, and that's it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
when you're there, but then you have no excuses if you're there. That's the downside to it.
Well, one of the prime example is Henri Gauthier-Brazon. Like the famous jumping pond shot. The perfect moment shot.
Cartier-Bresson, yeah.
He obviously he mentioned that to capture that shot, he actually visited that place many times before. And he studied how people behave there when they noticed people jumping, and that's when that gave him the idea of photographing that particular shot there. But then he studied the lighting, different scenarios. He went back there many times So like this is about, you know, something that we just basically what we just discussed, and you got to be there first, and you got to learn about it, and you're gonna do it, and then if you don't go there, how on earth are you gonna capture that particular shot?
Well, it goes back to the thing that a lot of people, I suggest people create a project for yourself. If you have a neighborhood, you go back over a year and photograph, or if you have a place, whatever, because giving yourself that world can create an incredible project for the photographer to go back. And, you know, it can be a 3 month, 6 month, 2 year lifetime project.
Yes.
Going back, and it's so interesting to see how your view can change over the months and or years if you do something. Maybe there's a visual maturation going on that you're building your maturity as a photographer.
Yep.
But it being there is the whole thing on this.
Absolutely. And another thing is, I think we've got a question here. Oh, MC's got a question there. I think it's asking about you, Jay. I don't know if you can read that. Has he remained faithful to a type of equipment, or is it a function of chance and circumstances?
Holy cow. That's a good one. I'm sponsored by a camera company, OMDS, Olympus. I'm one of their ambassadors. I will just why I do that is because I believe in their mission statement, their work statement, that to go back to small equipment, kind of like Oscar Barnack designed the original Leica around in 1927, I think it was, to be a small camera, unobtrusive. You'd have it with you all the time when you needed it. That's one of the reasons iPhones or smartphones are killing the consumer level camera divisions, because the camera's, it's there when you need it. So I try to get equipment that works for me, that is out of the way. It does come down to if I'm at a place and all I've got is my iPhone, you're darn right I'm going to shoot with that, because that's the equipment that's available. So it is a function of equipment. You find it that works for you, that fits your style, that can become invisible for you. You know, I see people on trips who carry massive cameras and they're putting the darn things down all the time because they're so heavy. It's like, why don't you go to something lighter or shoot what is best available for the picture at hand? And I think that's an important component. Like I said, I'm sponsored. That's why I use it, but I believe in their mission.
Yep. Okay.
Did
That's the answer.
that answer that?
Hopefully. And he didn't come back to me. Hopefully that's the answer. Another one, and is that about if you give some advice to people who wants to basically starting to get a little bit more serious about photography, what would you suggest them to in terms of elevating the basic skills, let's so to speak, you know, like, okay, oh well, I kind of mastered the exposures now. I know how exposure triangle works. I know how aperture, shutter speed, this and that. You know, I'm competent in that sense. So to take it to the next level, what would you tell the audience, you know, and what could they do to be better photographer?
First thing is just shoot. Get out there and shoot, and learn from your mistakes. If you don't get the perfect picture, analyze it, be very objective about your work. Well, this isn't working for this reason, then go back out and reshoot it. Learn camera as best you can. There are great courses at camera shops and at universities and everything else on basic photography. And that, like I keep saying, learn the camera so well that it becomes invisible in the process. Because what I see photographers in workshops and on trips and everything else, that they pick up their camera in a great situation, they don't know the camera, and they're looking at it, and it's them versus that thing. And it's a confrontational, it's an interference instead of, there's all my settings, and it becomes about capturing the picture. So know your camera as well as you can. Learn those basic tools of composition, but also be extremely honest about your work. One thing we force students to do in workshops, okay, every day you come in, you've got to go through your body of work and whittle it down to 20 images. which for many is like, I've never shot 20 images in one situation. Other photographers are, oh my God, how am I going to whittle down 800 pictures of 20 images? But that process is, and if you want someone to react to your work that all your pictures are great, talk to your mother. She's going to tell you you're the best thing since sliced bread. But it comes down
Mine
to
never did.
find a mentor, or look at your work and be extremely serious. Yes. Does this work? Because there's nothing worse than if you have to spend 5 minutes telling somebody about your photograph and why it works, it's not working. The picture, upon, like I said, it should engage, it should inform, it should pull them in immediately. So it is that shooting the picture.
I think a lot of people, especially those starting out, but even more experienced photographers, they don't know if their pictures are good, because you either trust yourself and your judgment, or you trust the trusted judgment of an expert who may not be visually very sophisticated. So I think a lot of beginners don't know a good photograph from a bad one because they don't have this kind of self-confidence and instinct.
Exactly. And that's why I suggest, look at magazines like National Geographic, where look and when you get to that photograph, and I still do it, that goes, oh my gosh, look at that. When it resonates, when it pulls you in, for the beginning photographer, why is that picture working? Yeah. Well, I remember that discussion Jimmy had on his presentation with Rod and Jay, that they kept talking about moment and they kept talking about palette. Well, all those become important things. Break the photograph down. Why is this working to me? When you get to one of your pictures that you don't like, that's as important. Why is this picture not working? That's as important information. Yes. And that's what, and I don't care if it's my workshop or anybody's, a good workshop is an incredible experience for a photographer, because there'll be an epiphany or epiphanies that occur during a workshop where all of a sudden you get it. And it's not necessarily rocket science, but it's incredible to see in a good workshop the quality of work for the participants go like during the week or during the number of days of the workshop. So it is, Rod, like you were saying, a lot of people, they don't know who to go to. Well, there's courses out there. Like I said, camera stores offer them. They become very common. There's online courses, but invest your money well. That's a problem, because there's, you don't want to spend your money in a workshop that's a non-productive workshop. Yep. But getting out there and shoot just to begin with, and force yourself to slow down. Yeah, absolutely. Because I see a lot of people. I know one photographer that said, I shoot 5,000 images a day, and then I just look through and try to find something. It's like, that's like fingernails on a blackboard. How do you see photographically? You don't. So I suggest to people to slow yourself down and really engage with each picture, to watch that dance going on in front of the camera. That we're like choreographers. We're watching this dance occur, and you're waiting for those prime little moments. Yep. And the more you shoot, the more you screw up, the more you make correct choices, the more you'll learn. Yes. And I promise you, the more this happens, the better your pictures will become. Don't just run and gun.
I think it's also a good thing is that, is to, have regular meetings with interested photographers together, not talk about gear, but talk about photographs. So each other can comment each other's photograph, I shot a bunch of these, what do you think? And, ask another person's opinion, because, obviously if it's a great photograph, people would notice straight away, and they would say, "Oh, I like this. This looks cool." And then in that way, that people can actually say, "Oh, why do you think it's cool?" And you kind of learn from it in a way. And also, I think another thing that a lot of people miss these days is actually studying photo books, which I think is a rare thing these days. People don't look at photo books anymore, and I think they're great inspirations. They're also great to train your eyes in reading photographs, and like you said, breaking them down to elements that I love doing. And then it's incredible assets, because once you learn those individual elements that make a photograph work, then you kind of try to copy the ideas when you start to photograph yourself, and you start to having more of a sharper eyes and looking into details, and then within that frame before you even click the shutter. So that's how I see photographer can improve in that way. And quite often nowadays, and people, looking at how a camera performs, how a lens performs, or what the capabilities are, what are the latest features, what's the latest resolutions of a sensor, more than, how does the light shape a photograph? How, we talked about it during the presentations earlier, these rim lights, how do you compose a photograph? How do you execute at the right time? And these are what makes the photographs more than the gear itself. And this is something that that's really important. And if you don't want to spend money in buying photo books, and these days you've got plenty of free resources online, on internet, so you can actually dig them up for free. Google a famous photographer like Jay Dickman. Just Google him. You'll see a lot of his photographs. And so, you can do something like that. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's very important. And I've come from the old. Sorry, Rod, I'll be down here in a second.
No,
but
no,
I think
it's fine.
I come from the world where the printed page or the print is the fruition of this business. I still love prints, and I'm a geek. I love my computer. I love working on it. But a print in the hand or a book makes the whole process that much more intimate and personal and engaging. And one thing I was going to say too, Jimmy, and I'll be done here in a second, Rod, is one thing to steer away from the beginning photographer too is don't go to the equipment forums where all these experts are telling you that you're less than pond scum because you shoot this brand of camera. I don't care what you're shooting. If you're comfortable with the camera, that's what you should be shooting.
Yeah, I think Jimmy's remark about photo books and yours as well. I think if you look at photographs online or on Instagram or any other digital platform, nobody gives photographs any time. It's only if you have a book or a print in front of you that you give photographs proper time to do their work. But I think the other interesting thing about getting better as a photographist, it's this process of self-reflection. So I come at this more as a journalist, and I strongly feel that the only way to become a better writer is to look at what you've written, and and perhaps a day later, and you either throw up your hands in horror and think that is just dreadful, or you might every 2 or 3 years, no more often than that, you might see a sentence and you think that was perfect. But if you don't do that in writing, and you don't do that in photography, you'll never get anywhere. You have to look at what you've done and see whether you like it or not, and move on from that and try and do it again, perhaps.
Yes.
I totally agree. Yep. Yeah, and the books are a great way because a book is so personal. And just even that entree from you're looking at one page and the introduction by turning the pages to the next. I look at work all the time on the internet, but there is nothing as engaging and kind of fulfilling as looking at the book.
Absolutely. And then when you open a book, you see a story or you see a body of work, and then you go on the internet, you're looking at individual photographs most of the time, so you're not really getting the sense of how this photographer think or thought at the time, and then what lead up to that particular moment. Like when you open a book, that gave you that journey, how that signature shot came about, and I find it really fascinating by actually reading book from page to page, because it's amazing to see that journey is an experience on its own, just by looking at it, reading all the narratives inside the book, and then you study the photo like for minutes, if not hours, just by looking at it, trying to break it down, trying to look at, oh wow, this is such a powerful photograph. And this is really, I think it's entertaining for people who are interested in photography.
Oh, completely.
It is really, really cool.
Absolutely.
Right. Oh, we got a few more comments, I think, isn't it? Okay, we got John here. Although you're a journalist, is there a particular genre or type of photography that you especially enjoy for fun? That's a good one.
And the answer to that is yes. Oh, I should go in. Okay. And I'm not being facetious, but it's kind of whatever I'm photographing at the time, because I just find, and I'm not trying to blow off the answer, but it really is, I just enjoy it so much, process of trying to get a good photograph out of everything, that because I'll get into one genre. Oh, wildlife. Oh, this is wonderful. I love this. I love looking for the moment, etc. Then I'll photograph people. It's like, oh, I love photographing people, because that's how we connect of who we are with each other, is through photographs, especially. That's why geographic is so powerful. And then I'll photograph landscape, and it's like, oh, I love seeing how the light plays on this. So
Yeah.
I think the honest answer is that it's whatever I'm photographing at the time.
Yep. And then we have Chris. I think we talk about how what we just talked about, and use print on demand and make a design or photo book. It would teach you editing and image selection, and gives some to have a good look at your work as well. I think so. That's maybe a fun exercise for anyone who wants to get into the more storytelling side.
Totally.
Of it.
But I think that's a really good statement, because going to do your own book, unless you're really wealthy and you can afford a full encyclopedic range of your photographs, doing one book with 40 pages, not a photo album, but maybe a single page per page.
Yep.
Talking about forcing you to, okay, what's working here, what's not working. And like I said, if you're handing your final book to somebody and they're looking through it, and by 2 pictures in, they're talking about where they're going to dinner that night, your book may not be working. So
Yeah.
that is a great way to do it, because it forces you to work with a finite amount of space and photographs.
Yes. And also, like if depending on what you're trying to showcase, and it also kind of assists you, trying to compose a storyline of the entire presentation. The beginning, like what we talked about earlier, from the beginning to the climax, and then the ending, the details in between, all these stuff, because like you said, you've got finite space within a book, and you have to assemble something to make sense. Otherwise, it's going to be disjointed single photos within a book and doesn't really tell you much. And so this is a really good exercise, I think, and so very good suggestion, I think.
It is, and it's also that thing of fall out of love with your photographs. That's one of the toughest things a photographer has to do. The backstory behind the photograph. You don't always have the time, nor does your audience have the attention span to hear the 10-minute description. So it does come down to step back, look at your photograph objectively. Does that photo work? Does it convey my narrative I'm trying to tell strong enough? It doesn't matter the backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. So final 2 things before we're going to wrap up, and I think this is basically just comment to what we just talked about. So Furious Doe say to see other photographers' photo. I think he's basically saying that how to improve photography. And then John also echoing it. I visit art galleries to get inspirations. I love art gallery. I go to photo exhibitions, photo shows, just to look at all these photographs being exhibited there, and also sometimes the winners from the competitions. You want to learn about them. Why did they win the competition? Why? You look at these photographs. You have to kind of understand. How did they get to that level? How do they? What's the meaning behind it? All that.
But I think John's also talking about. Go ahead.
I was only going to say, I think there must be a bit of a delay on this. Sorry. I think very often you go to an art exhibition, it could be paintings, not just photographs, and you see that other people have seen things that you haven't.
No.
And that can really open your eyes.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, is that we go to galleries to look at paintings too, to see how an artist translated the scene, look how they work with the light. Look at this. This is all incredibly instructive. And, look at how they work the paintings to the edges, where the very corners, the elements in there are incredibly critical. So art galleries are a great way to get inspiration. I mean, if you don't go to a great art, including photos and paintings and other interpretations, you should come out of that inspired, and that it's a great source for inspiration.
Great. Well, hope that all of you have some ideas after today, and and thank you all for tuning in. I think it's just about time. The reason I'm trying to rush is not trying to kick you guys out, because my camera seems to be running low on battery, so it's going to cut off very soon. I wish I had more time to linger around and then talk about photography, because as you can tell by now that I love talking about photography, love talking about different photographs, because it's an enjoyment on its own. So I thank you, Jay, for showcasing your photograph once again.
Absolutely.
And it's
Jimmy,
been a
thank you,
pleasure.
and Rod, it's great working with you all.
Yeah, it's been
great
a pleasure.
to meet you, Jay. Great.
And please come back. Please come back one more time in the future, and we talk more about photography and see more of your photographs, and hopefully we see more from your adventure this year.
Sounds good. I've got them coming up. Stay tuned. Watch Jay Dickman net, and you can see those things. And we'll
wonderful.
go from there. Thank you.
I'm gonna put some of your Jay Dickman's website details in the description later. I already have some already, and but the one you just mentioned, Jay, I don't think I have that. So if you can drop me a line, I'm gonna include it in the video description, so anyone who listens to this, they can click onto it later. And so this will be
I
great.
will do that.
Absolutely fantastic, and I really enjoyed the talk, really enjoyed the photographs, and thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure once again. So hopefully you guys learn a thing or two and be inspired by Jay's photographers and his ethics, and also his skills and creativity. So it's just been amazing. If you guys want to tune in again, remember that we host live chat every Wednesdays between Rod and I, and we also have some guests like Jay in the future, and so more to come. So thank you again for everyone who's tuning in. We shall see you all next time. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Rod.
Thank everybody for their time. I appreciate you being here. Talk to you soon.
Cheers.